Good afternoon and welcome to the River Calder, one of Lancashire's hidden rivers. It was one of those rivers that used to run a different colour every day in our industrial heritage, but now has got seriously cleaned up over the years. Today we're going after Grayling and we're going to use a method called trotting. Now, trotting, tackle is very simple. It's a rod, a reel, float, a few weights, hook and a little bit of bait. It's a very simple method of catching fish, but does require a little bit of technique. One of the biggest problems that most people face, that most people are afraid of, is using one of these. It's called a centre pin reel. It's called that simply because it's a drum that runs on a central pin. That's all there is to it. They're very simple things to operate once you know what you're doing. And hopefully by the time we finish this evening's talks, everybody will be able to at least have a degree of confidence about how to use this sort of equipment. Two styles of casting. The first style of casting is the thing that everybody sees John Wilson doing. Two fingers on there, you pull two loops of line out, sweep the rod forward and let it go. And yes, that works perfectly well, but it has a number of drawbacks. One is that the hook and the float and everything else are swinging about in the breeze and are likely to catch on the local herbage or anything that's lying around. The second is you're very restricted to the amount of distance you can cast. So what we're going to do today is slightly different. We're going to do a thing called the wallet cast, invented by a chap called F.W.K. Wallet. He called it the light float cast in the Nottingham style, and you can actually read the article he wrote in the Lonsdale Library series, Fine Fishing for Coarse Fish. And all he did was, if we say this is a standard shotting pattern, what we have is a float, a few weights, all clumped together, you notice, and then one weight about 4 inches, 5 inches above the hook. All I'm going to do, I'm going to take that weight and hold it in my hand like that. Then that leaves me a finger and a thumb free. Now you can use your finger or you can use your thumb. Some people prefer the thumb, I prefer the finger. Simple as that. Now all we're going to achieve is overcoming the inertia of the heavy drum by pulling back on this loop. As you can see, my finger's in this loop between the butt ring and the reel. And all I'm going to do is I'm going to drop the float and then pull back on that loop, and that fires everything out into the middle of the river just like that. Nothing more is required. It's the simplest thing in the world to do. But anglers being anglers, we do try and make it rather more complicated than it needs to be, don't we? Lots of people, including former pupils of mine, have written lots of articles trying to make this thing sound very complicated. You don't need a special rod, you don't need a special line, you don't need anything special. Whatever rod you've got that's long enough to be able to control your float. And this is Daiwa sensor, it's 4-pound breaking strain, cheap as chips, tough as old boots, and it's what I use for most general purpose coarse fishing. So once again, I've got the bottom split shot coming out the bottom of my hand. As you can see below my little finger, you can see the hook. You now know where it is. I now know where it is. It's quite safe. It's going nowhere. Place the tip of my forefinger in that loop of line. Then simply to set the reel spinning, drop and pull that loop of line. And stop it when the float hits the water. And that is all there is to it. Now, with a little bit of practice, yes, you can cast tremendously long distances. It's not uncommon for me to be able to throw a float from one side of the river to the other, and that's at its wider levels, down at the bottom end around Samlesbury. But that does take a little bit of practice. So for the purpose of most of Boland's fishing, you don't need to cast a huge distance. So 2 or 3 rod lengths is generally about as much as you need to get. So it's not a great hit it and heave. And in terms of actually the actual rod action, as you can see, there's very little.
Can't get the rod in.
Can't get the rod in. Right. I'm going to step back a few paces so that we can get the rod into the video.
So,
So, Again, the hook is below my hand, the loop of line is there. All I'm doing is pointing the rod tip at the water. And I'm going to just go slightly, raise the rod tip, just enough to swing the float out, and then pull. As you see, that flow out, it's 2/3 of the way across the river, and we're in action, and we're aware we're going. The float's charging off downstream now, reasonably under control.
Okay, out.
This time the float's going down, held back hard. Now you can see that the tip of the float is now facing back towards me. Now I'm holding it back particularly hard considering we're only on the edge of the current. But the idea is to make sure that the float goes down slowly and in a controlled manner. But also the big advantage is that now the bait will be going in front of the float. So if I want, what I can do and it's what we came for. There we go. Nice. That's modest grayling. No great size. Wet hands. Fish upside down. Slip hook out. Quick picture for admiration purposes. And back we go. Nice and gently. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is all there is to it. What we want to avoid, as you can see, the float is tracking rapidly across the river back towards me. Now the way we do this is by making sure that we're putting plenty of oxygen as the float is going down the river. I'll try and demonstrate that again, just in case, but ideally that's where our bait should be. We want to try and keep it on that track. But most of the time, the float will naturally take the water from that towards the near side bank. You can see it's going here. Now, two things that are very important. One is the positioning of your rod as you hold it, and the other is putting the appropriate amount of length in your line as the float goes down. The idea is the bait should go down in line with the loose feed that we put down. That's the absolute secret to trotting. So if your hook bait is amongst the flounder bait you've already thrown in, you have a handful of samples that put on them, then you're going to be okay. So what we have to do now, cast out, now I'm going to try and keep it out by holding the rod away from the body, which is very easy with one lightweight rod. And if I need to, I think we start to track out the line, I can go up and down like that, and then you notice that the float continues to go down the river in the smooth manner. At that stage, we're being the likely track of the loose fish, as you know.